So our lives do not mean anything. Palestinian lives mean nothing, you know.
So you have to understand how you humanize someone in order to then understand how you dehumanize them.
One thing you have to realize is that it's high time for Israel to shift their policy of having a Gaza there and to have a greater Israel.
If you look into the Zionist ideology, you will see that what we are seeing in Gaza is 75 years in the making.
And this will go down in history as the worst war on women and children, massacre on women and children.
What they're saying is we're not just going to kill anyone trying to eat food, we're going to kill anyone who's trying to give them food. Are we seeing now the Zionists going for it? Are we seeing them now really go for what they had planned in 1948? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to the Muslim Podcaster Show. I'm your host Majid, and today I'm joined by my co-hosts, Brother Rash and Brother Kam. Assalamu alaikum, brothers, and welcome to the show.
Wa alaikum salam. Pleasure as always.
Alhamdulillah, this is going to be the last Ramadan roundtable episode, obviously because Ramadan's almost finished. How are you guys feeling about that? It feels like it came, it went, and it seems like it's going quicker every year. Is it just me, or you guys aren't getting that same feeling as well?
No, definitely the same feeling. I got quite sad and emotional when someone mentioned the other day that yesterday was the last Jummah of Ramadan. That's when you know it's very, very close. When you think about you're not going to get another Jummah in Ramadan, and who knows if we'll still be alive next year to have another one. So yeah, definitely. Was it someone who once said it's like, leaving, like a very fond relative leaving, and you get upset from it when they've been here for a while in your home. So it definitely feels like that. Yeah, it is difficult, really. People don't appreciate it. A lot of people non-Muslims might be like, oh, okay, you get to go back to food and thingy in the day and stuff, but they don't really appreciate just how much, we love it when it's here.
Yeah, and I think, do you know what I feel like I'll miss the most is, do you know, that togetherness with the brothers. Obviously, since the COVID effect on everybody, people haven't been getting out much. People haven't been meeting each other, greeting each other, and then Ramadan is like the only time that you actually feel like, you're back to normal. So I think that side of things is quite sad because that togetherness in Tarawih, and then up all night doing Qiyamul Layl, having Fajr, doing Fajr together, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, inshallah we'll get another Ramadan next year, but who knows? It's all in Allah's plans, isn't it? So
Yeah,
a lot of
exactly.
a lot of the Gazan population couldn't say the same.
Yeah, whether it's Gaza, whether it's anywhere, no one can guarantee this, and that's why it's important that there's so much emphasis put on the Ramadan. The fact that, if somebody came into Ramadan and left Ramadan without benefiting from it, he is ultimately one of the losers, because this is the month which is like a gold rush of good deeds, a gold rush of amal. You don't even have to try hard in this month, right? And if you didn't take advantage of that, then surely your priorities are mixed up. But you're right. Let's make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to see another Ramadan and record another podcast in Ramadan, maybe. This is the last one. But let's get into the flow, because today's topic is kind of explosive. Yeah, I think it's a fitting end to the Ramadan Roundtable series. And today want to speak about we're going to speak about Gaza. I don't think there's much change there. We've had a couple of different type of episodes the last couple of weeks. The one about unity, and the last one was Rash. Quickly, I'm getting old. Quickly remind me. Last week we recorded a podcast on.
Sorry, I didn't have my mic on. Yeah, about the meaning of La ilaha
The
illallah. So
meaning of
that one,
La
yeah,
ilaha
thoroughly
illallah.
enjoyed that one.
Yeah, subhanallah. But even though there's certain concepts which were important in those podcasts, they were linked to Gaza. It's like if somebody was to check the last 10 podcasts that I've recorded, it's how do you disconnect it from that? Yeah, it's how do you disconnect it from that? So today we want to speak about a really important topic, an interesting one. I'm sure you guys are going to have some really interesting views on this, right? So we know a few days ago that there's a charity called World Central Kitchen, and a food charity, and they've been working in Gaza, and their workers, their aid workers, they were, the only way I can put it is executed in Gaza. They were executed, right? I mean, we could probably speak about the events of one car being targeted and then the people jumping in the second car and the second car being targeted until they jumped in the third car and then they were all killed. And the terrifying moments that those people must have experienced, it's I just pray that we don't have to experience stuff like this, but it must have been terrifying. So this is nothing but an execution, right? But people may think, well, listen, there's nothing new here, boss. People have been dying, aid workers have been dying. However, something was different here. The aid workers were not necessarily Palestinian. So you had 3 British nationals, you had 1 Australian, I think it was a dual national, 1 Polish national, and an American Canadian dual citizen, right? And also 1 Palestinian brother as well. So what has been a little crazy in regards to the fallout of this event is how the world reaction has been towards it, right? So you've got, for example, Joe Biden, the US president. He said he was outraged and heartbroken. And he said that the aid workers were brave and selfless. And he also said that Israel has not done enough to protect aid workers trying to deliver desperately needed help to civilians, right? He also, for the first time, from what I read, demanded a ceasefire. He called for an immediate ceasefire, right? US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, he said, if we don't see the changes we need to see, there will be a change in our policy. Rishi Sunak was also, he also said that he was appalled. And the Australian Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, basically said that Israel's excuses were not good enough, right? And this actually led to the Zionists admitting that a grave mistake was made. And actually, you guys might have read 2 officers who were involved in this execution, I'm going to call it that, have been sacked, citing that they made a mistake with the bag that one of the guys was carrying, and they mistook it as a weapon. Now, just to add to this, up to between 196 to 203 aid workers have so far been killed in Gaza. This is before the events a couple of days ago, right? With the World Central Kitchen. And also, we've had maybe between 40 to 50,000 Palestinians who have been made shaheed and 60, 70,000 injured. And when we're talking about injuries, we're not talking about, a scratch on a hand. You're talking about life-changing injuries. So what my question, and Cam, I'm going to start off with you, yeah, is why do you think there's such a disparity in the global response between the sort of outpouring of support for World Central Kitchen, the aid workers, right, and the mutual response we've seen so far in regards to the lives lost by Palestinians in Gaza, and also all the other aid workers, who are mainly part of UNRWA? What's your thoughts, bro? What's the difference?
Yeah, I think it's twofold, really. The first thing which we sort of experience globally is the inherent racism towards Muslims. So our lives do not mean anything. Palestinian lives mean nothing. They've already called Palestinians human animals. They've called them all sorts. They don't see them as human, especially the Israelis and the IDF. So any killing of aid workers up to this point, like you mentioned, more than a few hundred, it wouldn't have got much media attention because, it's just this constant case of dehumanization. And that's not just the case in Palestine. This was the case even in the Iraq War. We saw millions die. Where did anyone bat an eyelid, really, across the world? Actually, the fallout of the Gaza genocide today is probably much more stronger than the Iraq War in terms of the response from the globe. So even since those days, the Muslim blood has been cheap. So there's that element that, no matter if there's a massive atrocity, look at Al Shifa Hospital. The stories coming out of Al Shifa Hospital are way worse, way more terrifying. Bodies being bulldozed over and over again, people being raped for days, people in pitch black, blindfolded and beaten for days. There's it, and then obviously there's so far worse torture that happened there that we would never find out because it was never documented or nobody has evidence of it. But from later on, maybe we will see some more evidence come out. So this dehumanization is the first aspect, I'd say, is why we see a disparity between the two news reports. And secondly, there's a political angle as well. It's not just WCK, but we've seen UNRWA being attacked by Israel vehemently. They want to dismantle it. They've said it many times up to this point. There's a lot of quotes of them saying that this needs to be removed. It's a terrorist organization and it's there to continue the Gaza refugee crisis for indefinitely, because they almost house they look after almost all of the refugee centers and schools and all that kind of stuff. So they know that then one thing, if they dismantled, would be UNRWA would lead to a mass expulsion of Palestinians from Gaza. So UNRWA has been targeted. The next second biggest aid in terms of food, not in terms of infrastructure or anything like that, because there's other organizations for that, but in terms of food was WCK. And now people are saying, why would they attack WCK? They look like a very Western setup. They have Western intelligence security officials with them. They have all non-Muslims mainly working for them. Maybe just the drivers and stuff are Palestinian. Why would they attack their own? Because they've always been seen as a trusted partner for Israel as well, as an aid delivery. Israel, even the words of Netanyahu recently, he's also concerned with quote marks, because they've always seen WCK as their partner in terms of delivering aid. But one thing you have to realize is that it's high time for Israel to shift their policy of having a Gaza there and to have a greater Israel. So even if American and British and any other international body has a different idea to Israel, they will have to be at odds with them. And we've seen this throughout the entire genocide, that Israel and the West generally headed by US, have been at odds with each other, and they're almost playing chess with each other, right? And this is another example of where Netanyahu's far-right government, which have already stated, and we've seen in the ICJ trial, we've seen all this time through their media, even the soldiers, what they talk about, their whole goal is to push the Gazan population out of Gaza, claim it as their own. They've already talked about settlements there. They've already drawn up plans. They've had meetings there. Smotrich and Ben Gvir and stuff have been seen dancing around, having meetings with settlement building companies and things like that. So this is their plan. It's all out in the open. It's naive for us to think that they might want some sort of two-state solution, or they might want a solution where there's going to be some refugees there. No, they've been very clear. And that's why the ICJ trial also laid it bare to the rest of the world. Actually, is the case for them wanting the whole of Palestine is very clear. So this is my angle. My angle is that WCK attack is purely another example of Israel showing the West, the US, British, whoever it is that are pressuring them to push for a two-state, or even just pressuring them just to get aid in and keep the Palestinian refugee crisis ongoing, that they are not, this is not their plan. This is going against their plan, and they need to really punish someone and show them that, no, look, we're serious about this. We'll attack the embassy the day before, then we'll do this after. And it really upped the ante. And it probably did shock even Western, even probably the US government. I don't think this was in their plans, in terms of they weren't aligned on this.
Yeah, I mean, there's loads that I'm sure we're going to discuss further. I have a question which I want to raise as well, but let me hear from Rash first. And just to let everyone know, please make dua for my brother Rash. He's not feeling that well, so please excuse him if he sneezes or coughs.
Yeah, so it's more of a block nose, but Jazakallah, I appreciate the disclaimer just in case. Both of Cam's points are probably the areas I would have gone to as well, but I'll just give a slightly different elements of it rather than repeating his point. So the dehumanization element, that is critical, because let's take some anecdotal evidence rather than just kind of mention the the grand plan. The anecdotal side is, look at all the Western papers and how they've gone into the people, those 7 people, talked about their lives. That what was one of the guys, Jacob, I think he was I think he was American and Canadian, I think. He had American, Canadian dual passport. They started to talk about the fact he's got a small child. He was in Afghanistan and what he did. And again, very sad story. And he wanted to make a difference. Again, none of it saying that it's not true. But the issue is, look how they humanize it. So you have to understand how you humanize someone in order to then understand how you dehumanize them. So they humanize these people. They put the story in the media, look at this person and what's happened, and that gets people to feel for that person. Whereas when it's Muslims and when it's Palestinians and when it's children, even though it's children, and that's had a significant impact, because this is where, when it's not children, it's a bit more difficult, because you don't really need to dehumanize children. People have a natural attachment to children at the end of the day. That's why there's been such a change in public opinion, not only in America but across the globe, because people are calling this a war on women and children. And this will go down in history as the worst war on women and children, massacre of women and children. And it also highlights the cowardness of this entity. Because look, people could say this dehumanizing aspect of it, by putting all these stories out, will have an effect on Western populations. Oh, look what Israel's done. It's taken out these people. This guy had a wife and a kid and all of that. That's the humanizing aspect. But people will also hopefully look at it and go, if you guys are like an elite army and you thought there was one Hamas operative, even mistakenly or correctly, say it was even correct, in one of those vehicles, why are you missiling them from the air and taking out other people that are your allies, people that you work with, and going, that's okay, that's collateral damage? That's cowardice. And it just highlights that the West is waking up to Israel's cowardice in this event, but we've been watching Israel's cowardice for the last 6 months and beyond, actually way beyond before that as well, not just since October the 7th. We've seen their cowardice because they're just bombing people indiscriminately, and the dumb bombs as well that they're using in civilian areas. So the dehumanization element is the element that deserves focus, because the media machine does that. So them being sympathetic now, and even some of them are coming out admitting it themselves. Oh yeah, look, why has it taken us 7 Western people to be killed? They like self-reflecting. But wait there a minute, your self-reflection is too late. I'm sorry. People have been calling for this. You people in positions of power, you've facilitated this. You have no moral compass to now suddenly go, oh yeah, maybe we should do something about this. So that's a critical element. I won't go into the political side just yet. We can discuss that a bit more, but certainly Israel from the beginning said they were going to do this. Why are we surprised? South Africa plainly put it into their document for the ICJ. It's all of the quotes are there. All of the quotes that say we're going to starve them, we want to depopulate the area, we want all of that. I won't go into it. All of that was clear. This attack on WCK is only a direct extension of what they said themselves. So in no way was it a mistake. And sadly, some of the Western governments are believing that it was a mistake.
Yeah, no one believes it's a mistake, bro, because you can make a mistake once, twice, and not the third time where like I said, you executed these people. So some really interesting points. And just to add to it, then, you're right. I mean, you mentioned the ICJ ruling, right? You mentioned the quotes by the Zionist leaders post October 7th. But I think, you know what's actually getting out there now is the true information, the real information of what's been happening for the last 75 years. I think that's got out there now, because that narrative has a narrative of this, tiny little democracy surrounded by enemies, which, it has this existential threat over its neck all the time, right? That's blown out the water. Now, what people should do, and I encourage this to everyone listening or watching this, is do some research, because forget October the 7th, forget ICJ. If you look into the Zionist ideology, you will see that what we are seeing in Gaza is 75 years in the making. And that's no exaggeration. If you read the book by Ilan Pappé, 10 Myths About Israel, it talks about how even when they originally, the Zionists started to emigrate to Palestine, right? They started buying up bits of land. Then what we see in 1948, and what we see in 1948 and what they call the so-called 1948 war, actually the Zionists took more than what the UN had actually even promised them, right? And if you listen to some rabbis, they will tell you that, listen, that this is a battle for conquest, because even in 1948, we took over lands where not a single bullet was fired towards us. So this is not hidden. And actually, in 1948, there were discussions of why did they stop and not take West Bank. And at that time, I'm sure it's Ben Gurion, right? He was of the view that, look, we have a problem with the Palestinian population. We can't take up huge areas of land where within those land we are a minority. There's a problem, right? What we see is there was a bit of to and fro. However, in 1967, they took over West Bank. They took over Gaza, right? So what we're seeing now is something, and this is going to lead me to my next question, which I'm going to ask. But before that, let me just build some context that when we see this attack on WCK, in my opinion, this attack is calculated to an extent where when they said we are going to starve the people, like what Rash said, they weren't joking. Because by this attack, even other agencies, charities have pulled out now. So when they're saying, basically, what they're saying is we're not just going to kill anyone trying to eat food, we're going to kill anyone who's trying to give them food. And that's what we're seeing. Why? Because what's the ultimatum is to totally take these people out. Now, my question is, I got two questions. The first one is about racism. We can come back to this one, but I'll throw it out anyway. That, when we talk about racism, do you think that this racism is just to do with Muslims, or there is this racism to do with white people and anyone that's not white, right? First question. Second one is, Cam, you touched upon it. You touched up upon this, right? Western nations pushing two-state. Looks like the Zionists are holding the ground. Are we seeing now the Zionists going for it? Are we seeing them now really going to ignore everything that's been told to them by the Western governments? And are we seeing now them actually going to be taking over Gaza, i.e. the steps towards it, and then what they're going to do in West Bank? Or is this the time they think is the time to go for what they had planned in 1948? What do you think? Anyone, guys?
Yeah. So on the topic of racism, I think, like we've discussed before, obviously as Muslims we know there's a battle between haqq and batil. This is clear from the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us, and over history, since even from the time of the Prophet ﷺ, we've seen this. And this is just another example of the hatred for Muslims is much more bigger than the hatred for a different color to white, right? Their first attack is on Muslims, and if there is no Muslims there to attack, that's when they default to their very animalistic behavior of having noticed non-Islam, where they start attacking each other for their colors, and patriotism and stuff kicks in. But the initial attack, I believe, is purely on the basis of these lot are Muslim, because the Israeli society is very mixed, because they have,
when you say attack, here, if you want to discuss the issue of racism, is to do with the response, the global response. Like you mentioned, this is, and I agree with you. But what my question is, some people might say, well, racism is to do with race, isn't it?
Yeah.
You mentioned Muslims. So, I mean, we don't like using the term, but people use Islamophobia. They link it like to Islam
Yeah.
and Muslims, isn't it? But when we say
Yeah.
racism, what I was saying that, yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying, but I also believe that there is this, that these colonialists, these, this white supremacy, right? This mentality hasn't gone.
No, definitely. No, definitely hasn't gone. No, definitely. Yeah, you're completely right in that. But what we're seeing today is actually it's a bit more than that. Obviously, I think for Israel's case, it's more of a case of they have wanted to lay claim to this land for a long time. So whoever was going to be there was going to inevitably have this fate. They would have attacked even if they were Christians there today, or Jews, or even Jews from a different sect. This would have happened because they've always had that claim that they wanted all of this land to be Greater Israel. It's even part of the very early plans, like the Oded Yinon plan. If you ever look at that, that's also one where they go beyond that. They go through the Sinai, they go into Egypt, they go out into all the way up to Saudi. So they've had these grand plans from a long time ago. So I definitely think, yeah, from when I say racism, I'm not specifically talking about color, but also agree that yeah, there's still this white supremacy aspect, especially in their government and their top figures. They're all, look at them, they're all white or white old men. Have you ever seen a colored politician in Israel? I don't think I can even name one, to be honest.
Yeah.
And then your second,
even though
yeah,
the racism element was to do with the reaction of the world. However, let's move
yeah.
on from this one.
What was your second
What I want
one?
to get into is a second point. Like, are they going for it?
Oh yeah. That's a really good point. So I've been saying for the last 3 or 4 months they've been going for it. I've already agreed. There's two-state solution has gone out the window. Since 70% of the land of Gaza pretty much is destroyed, what state do you build on destroyed rubble? There's no way. There's no infrastructure. There's no government. The government it was Hamas, and they've completely vilified them to the point that they will never have any representation, even though the people give them their vote. So there's no way that there's any form of state. And when with the idea of bringing in PA and people like that and Mahmoud Abbas, it's absolute joke. The people would never accept it. It would be an absolute dictatorship like Sisi style, because every single person there would be against him. In fact, he probably wouldn't last very long because the people will revolt against him. So the two-state has gone. This is purely about damage limitation for the US. I believe that at the moment, the way the US are treading, and I've been saying this for a while, the timing of Israel to for this 7th of October to happen, I think there was some sort of intelligence that allowed it to go bigger than it was. Because if you look at some of the reports from Hamas, even they were surprised they were allowed in for so long. The security was dropped because they needed Israel needed a pretext for this sort of response to go all out. So I think, in my opinion, essentially they've gone too far now, and two-state solution is out the window. There's damage limitation happening now, whereby America know that if they go too far, this could cause World War III, and what they're trying to do is basically contain Israel to say, okay, have some red lines, don't go all out. We need to resolve the issue of the refugees. They can't just be eliminated. Potentially, this port that they're building may be their solution, the American solution, to say, okay, Egypt aren't taking them, Jordan are never going to take them, the Muslims will never just take the Palestinians, from a case of as in abandoning Gaza, not because they don't want to take in Palestinians from an emotional point of view. Obviously, everyone would want to look after them, but if there's no other way out, then the only other way out is the US building this temporary port, bringing all the aid there, slowly moving people from Rafah towards this port, and then who knows, the expulsion of the Palestinians. Because at the end of the day, if you're starving and you're on the edge of death, most likely you can't blame them if they want to emigrate or migrate somewhere else. They're trying to do that, but even then, there's reports from children, they interviewing children who are starving, and they're still saying no, we'll never leave the land. So who knows? The strength of the iman of the Muslims in Palestine is something that still, subhanallah, is shocking everybody. So that's my opinion. I do think Israel are going for it from a political perspective, but they're meddling with Western interests in terms of, they don't think that would be feasible for the Middle East for Israel to take over, especially Al Quds, because that is a contention not just in Palestine but for the rest of the Muslim world. That will definitely cause World War III unless they thought of an internationalization plan for it.
Yeah, no, some good points there. I mean, the thing is when we're saying that the Zionists are going for it, this is with the backdrop of basically, the Americans not wanting this.
Yeah.
So it's that's the situation here where will they do it? And also the other question is that are they going for it, or is Netanyahu just doing what he can to stay in power? But however, he can't be stupid. He's not immortal. He's not gonna be in office forever, So would he do all of this only to stay or in power, or are they hoping that basically, if they were able to get away with this, then the Israeli public might forgive them because they were the ones who, took back the whole of the promised land and removed the infidels from their point of view and the Gentiles from the land, right? Rash, what are you saying?
Yeah, so there's a way to look at this from my opinion as well, is if you think about it, all of these people who have come out with these genocidal comments, the leaders, the right wing in Israel, those genocidal comments, yeah, are people kind of not clever enough to realize that those genocidal comments didn't just come because of October the 7th. Those people weren't like non-extreme, nice kind of Zionist before October the 7th. October the 7th suddenly happened and they just went, crazy, I'm just going to come out, let's wipe them all out. Those were their views before October the 7th. People really need to appreciate this. So October the 7th might have been, like some of the points can be, that instigated a certain set of events, but those people had those views from before October the 7th. So now try to put it in your mind that if there's people who are in power that have that feeling towards Palestinians, towards Muslims, towards what the Greater Israel plan is, if they have those feelings, then they're going to be looking for an opportunity to be able to execute that plan. If you then add to that plan what is some of the projects that have been going on for many years about building the Temple of Solomon and destroying Al-Aqsa, and all of the research that Loki's been doing about all of these institutes and things that exist even in the UK and in America, where they've had plans to how do they get rid of Al-Aqsa, how do they build their third temple and all of these things. And even all this crazy stuff that you've been hearing about the red cow being sacrificed and all of these things. All of that didn't just happen because October the 7th happened. All of that was always going to happen. What October the 7th has allowed them to do is accelerate it significantly. So whether, like they let Hamas do more or less or whatever, that's a conversation that you can have. But actually, what happened on October the 7th has actually allowed them to accelerate their plans. So if it's allowed them to accelerate their plans, obviously you could ask the question as, oh, okay, did they let some of this happen? And then your initial question about, are they making the most of this? Well, it's been an absolute PR disaster for them from a worldwide point of view. Really, what else have they? They've got to just go for it. They're not going to get another opportunity like this. And that's what they're doing. There's two reasons I think that is one reason is, like say, will there be a better opportunity for them to fully take Gaza and also beyond that? And the other thing is Netanyahu, from his perspective, as soon as this ends, he's getting locked up. And not just because of the issues with the bribery and corruption and stuff that he's got, but the West has completely had enough of him as well. So from his perspective, it is, I need to keep this going as long as possible. I want to leave a legacy behind. I want to be the one that's known for having, taken all of Gaza and kind of spreading, or he goes down in history as someone who facilitated further the Greater Israel plan, and it keeps him out of prison for a period of time. So I think they are going for it. And I also think it's very important for people to appreciate this point of they wanted to do this anyway. They've had plans to do this regardless. Look at how they're treating Muslims and Palestinians and Christians in West Bank. You know, is getting to them to a stage where people are struggling to live in those places. And then they've taken that to the next level in Gaza because they're going, we just want to starve this population to death. And like you say, like Cam said, you know, push them to the limit. They themselves, and this is the strength of Islam, they themselves probably can't believe that Muslims, after this much oppression, this much starvation, this much bloodshed, are still going, I'm not going to leave this land. This is my land.
Yeah. And especially just even to add up, Netanyahu's known as the hitman for killing Yitzhak Rabin, the previous prime minister. So they've got blood on their hands from a long time ago, and the reason for that was because Yitzhak Rabin was the person that signed the 1967 treaty at the time, and they saw that as a Netanyahu himself obviously would have seen that as an attack on the Greater Israel plan of having all of that.
He was the guy who was involved in the Oslo Accords.
Oslo Accords, yeah. Oh yeah, sorry, Oslo Accords. That's not the 1967. Sorry, the Oslo Accords.
Yeah, Netanyahu would be pretty old then if he was involved in that.
And the other point I wanted to make is when I mentioned the timing, actually, I forgot to mention a few key points, and this probably will give people some food for thought. The timing of this is really key from Israel's perspective. It's a time when the American elections are still sort of before the American elections, and Biden is already struggling against Trump, right? So if he loses the support of the Jewish lobby, he's done for. He's already probably going to lose the next elections, even with the support of the Jewish lobby. So imagine now the Jewish lobby pull out because of his support, and because there's a lot of Muslims will watch this and be like, no, but these guys, Americans, been given, like, even just the day that they said the ceasefire, for a ceasefire, they also then signed a deal to give another thousands of missiles, right? So how does this make sense? They can't really make sense of this slap on one cheek and then rubbing the other cheek, that sort of thing. So it's almost like there's two things going on. They're giving them, but at the same time they're shouting at them. And people are getting confused, and the reason for this is because they're playing, like I was saying, they're playing a fine balancing act with this issue. The Biden administration, it's not a case of the US as a foreign policy. This is now even party politics have now come into play here, where they're thinking about their own survival as the Democrats in the next elections. While Trump is also playing on that and saying, giving his line on what he would have done and things like that. So there's definitely a fine balancing act in terms of Republican Democrats next elections. And then on top of that, the timing of this is also key with the fact that they don't have any funds. Look at when the Ukrainian issue, if ever anyone has been following Russia, Ukraine, even amongst this last 6 months, it's very difficult to follow that, but I've been following it. There's been massive advancements and gains from Russia, almost to the point the wars inevitably Russia's won. Inevitably. They're now going to take, there's an area, I can't remember the name, which overlooks most of the other areas, which is basically a strategic point, which will overlook all the areas that are being controlled by Ukrainian military and Western military. And if they take that, it's game over, because that is the location to take. And they've been pushing ahead with that, and people have been giving stats on the number of people lost. Even with the French coming in now saying, they'll support vehemently, they'll even build bases, then they'll take their own troops. And all of this has been happening during the Gaza genocide the last 6 months, and this is just a case of Russia have won the war. Their economy's gone stronger, their military is stronger. They've got drones being built in the thousands every day just to take out each soldier. Each drone takes out a soldier. To them, they're not even losing soldiers now because of their drone capabilities. So people need to realize that America are fighting so many battles at the moment that Israel have really timed this to perfection to gain what they need to gain on the back of America's distractions. So there's a lot of things. If you look at world politics, you'll find that actually this was the perfect time for Israel to go off and just take the rest of Palestine and not have that much backlash, especially from the the world superpower today, which is America, because they can't. As soon as they do that, Biden's losing, definitely losing the next election, and Trump's coming in. So it's really, really tight.
But you know, October the 7th, right?
Yeah.
I agree in regards to the attack by Hamas. Very soon after, there were reports where Hamas was saying, "To be honest with you, we went to just get hostages, and then these guys turned out to be paper tigers." Basically, one guy even said, like, had we known they were going to fold like this, we would have gone to Tel Aviv, right?
Yeah.
So they never had a plan. This wasn't a plan to take over the land, right? It was an operation which
free
was
their own
designed
hostages
to free their own people the hostages
in
in
prison.
prison, right? However, one thing it did do is it put Palestine, the issue of Palestine, back on the map
Yeah.
at a time when the normalization was going ahead, right? Where if all these Arab nations had normalized on the back of what the Zionists were doing, which meant they don't care about the Palestinians, right? So the other school of thought may be that actually, okay, I think it's quite apparent that the Zionists are making the most of what happened, and they don't care about public opinion. I'm telling you that right now, they do not care about public opinion,
No.
right? They don't care. They will do, and they will go to any extent that they can do to achieve what they want, right? But the other school of thought is the fact that they could have achieved this in a different way, just through the normalization. Because remember, through normalization, the Arab countries weren't even, in the old days, they were like, we'll recognize you if you establish a Palestinian state. Recently, these regimes were groveling, right? Because they want to obviously be in good books with Washington, right? They were groveling to give up nothing. I mean, give nothing. Oh, sorry, not give nothing, take nothing.
Yeah.
In terms of normalization. So I think that's where, I think maybe the truth's more in the middle, the fact that these guys have just taken advantage of it.
Yeah, the two things are not mutually exclusive. Look, because Hamas, and so forget Hamas, just the resistance, and Palestine and Gaza, they recognize that after the Great March of Return and trying trying to do it in a peaceful way, and after Netanyahu in the UN showing the map which wipes out all of Gaza, and after especially the normalizations, they needed to do something. Because, like you said, the Palestine issue is being wiped away. Yeah. So that's why I don't think it's mutually exclusive. They needed to do something, and that's when Al-Aqsa flood happened. Yeah. At the same time, like you say, especially because intelligence came out as well about, Egypt telling Israel that, look, something's brewing, yet they allowed it. So at the same time, from an Israeli standpoint, they're like, okay, if they wanted to nip this in the bud, they could have done more so, but were they, or are they really as kind of, they're supposed to be the most surveilled state in that area, is the most surveilled area in the world. All of a sudden, the most surveilled area in the world allows people to have, 10, 12, or 7, 8 hours of just free reign. So from their point of view, we're looking for an opportunity. So that's why I don't think the two things, it's not one or the other. I think it can be both.
At the same time, Rash, when we talk about what Al-Aqsa flood did was destroy the notion of invincibility within the Zionist state. So, but
it still did that. It still did that regardless of if they allowed some more of it than they would have normally allowed. Remember, at the end of the day, they killed their own.
Yeah, I understand that, but I'm just thinking from a point of view. I see where you guys are coming from, because even at the time, to be honest with you, the way they've maximized on this, right? And then there's talks about troops being moved into other areas, and people are shocked. Like, you got Zionist soldiers who have actually served on the border, if you want to call it that, and they've said, I can't understand how this can happen.
Yeah.
Right? It's like almost impossible. But then at the same time, and I'm not saying this from an emotional point of view, it's like, that's what I'm saying, whether there's the truth more in the middle, because when we indicate that they allowed this to happen, then the way I see it is that this notion of invincibility that actually has been built up for decades. Why would the Zionists want to lose that over this? I don't think I personally think it happened. It escalated. It just so happens that there was maybe that they were lax. They were watching too much documentaries or whatever. They were busy, right, on the cameras, and things just happened the way they did by that with the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what these guys have done now, they've taken it. Okay, this is our 9/11. The Americans did whatever they wanted to do on the back of 9/11. We're going to stretch this out, and we're going for it now. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I'm inclined towards.
Yeah, no, and there's lots of merit in that. And actually, if you think about it, by saying it's a complete Israel job, you're really dampening the resistance, and that's not true at all. There's definitely insincere elements of the resistance that want, like we've mentioned, all the things that push them towards actually having to act. So no, yeah, I think definitely that sort of it's going to be a bit of both, and we won't know until things calm down and we find out what the actual end goal is. But I think the main point is that it's still not going to Israel's plan. Like when we're talking about this and saying Israel want to take it all, and it's not going to their plan. The resistance are still strong. They've not dismantled, people saying not even 20% of its capability. They're moving from tunnels left to right still. They're still sending out videos, they're still sending rockets. So there's still an element of actually it's not going to plan, and that's why all of these mistakes are happening. Otherwise, it would have gone a lot more smoother for Israel. All of these, issues and killing of the WCK and dismantling UNRWA and attacking the hospitals, attacking healthcare, all that kind of stuff. This desperate attempt by Israel to completely starve the population. This probably wasn't part of their plan. Part of their plan was probably trying to get them across Egypt, open the borders, and them go into the Sinai, and then them taking it rather peacefully, to be honest. But it's definitely not gone to Israeli plans.
This is similar to what Rash was saying earlier. This is cowardice. If you look at the Libyans at the time of Omar Mukhtar, for example, when they were getting a bit of a beating, what do? They put all the population to concentration camps. Right? They couldn't fight them. Okay, what can we do? Okay, let's support base other people. Let's starve them, because if you starve them, then they can't support the resistance. And on top of that, you kind of like emotionally blackmail the resistance to think, well, you know what, our people are suffering. We might as well put down our guns, right? This is not bravery. There was a Channel 4 interview last couple of days by that Krishna guy.
The news anchor.
The news anchor, yeah, he was interviewing. It's nothing new, but maybe it is for people listening or watching. He was interviewing a ex-Zionist soldier, and that guy was saying, look, he was like, when we talking about October the 7th, he goes, the idea that the Palestinians basically are nothing goes back a long way, right? He goes, right now, so Krishna's asking, like, look, when they're killing, is there no accountability? He goes, look, right now, the finger on the trigger is so easy because every soldier knows that no matter what they do, there will be no accountability. And he goes, this comes directly from the top. So he goes, look, I've been there. He goes, I've been there. I've done this, right? And this is the reason why they can just kill people like they're playing Call of Duty. Yeah. Because there's no accountability, but not just because there's no accountability. There's an element of dehumanization. But I would even say that it's difficult how to say this, but these kind of people are quite wretched in the sense, like, it seems like, we see Abu Ghraib, we see what the Americans did in Iraq and Afghanistan, and it just seems like these guys are willing to go even further, like do things which other people might think, you know what?
Do you think there's an element, you know, a lot of people try to go, okay, look, they're Zionists, they're not Jews. I don't know how much information you have on this. I don't know too much about this really, but some people are saying this is where the religious element comes in. You know, this whole concept of Gentiles and how Jews have, like, they are the saved race and everybody else is like their slaves and stuff. It starts to make you think that that's where that already natural dehumanization comes from, because if you believe that from a religious standpoint, and then we know there are a lot of Jews that are completely anti-Israel, so I'm not, because so there is the other side of it, so I don't know really, but when a lot of this stuff that's come out over the last few months about some of the Jewish views of others other than Jews make you think that dehumanization is innate, as in they're pushing of dehumanizing anybody other who isn't someone Jewish, but that obviously comes across anti-Semitic. But this is the discussion that is taking place. I don't know much about that, but that certainly it fits the narrative. It fits the fact that how can you treat people, like you said, wretched? How can you kill innocent women and children in that way? But actually, they don't see it as innocent women and children. They've said it in their own rhetoric. They see them as the people who are mothering the future terrorists, so they're terrorists as well. That's their stance.
Bro, there is that, and I think you see this is why you can't blame it on Ben Gvir and Smotrich, because the extreme right only came into power in the recent years, right? This has been happening since 1948, so there's definitely something there from their ideology. However, I do and Ilan Papi actually says that, you know what, you know, the view towards Palestinians, whether you're on the left, on the right, in the center, it's the same. However, one might be a bit more extreme in the sense like kill them. The other one might say, actually, let's displace them, right? The goal is to take Palestine. Now, recently, what we're seeing is the level that it's at right now and what we're seeing live on our TVs. I think there is an added effect of the far right government and the rhetoric about Amalek and the prophecies. And this is why, you know, this is why I'm thinking, obviously, Netanyahu himself, he's secular. From what I know, yeah, he's secular, right? And to be honest with you, most of these leaders have been secular anyway. However, now they have a far right coalition. Now, you know, when we're talking about public opinion, could it be that the reason why they don't care about public opinion is because they're coming from the point of view from the religious text that, listen, once this is sorted out, we've got Solomon's temple back, the Messiah comes, who cares about UN? Who cares about US? We got the Messiah here. You understand? Because you look at their reckless actions, it's weird. It's like you are doing these actions, and that's why there are some Israelis that are coming out and holding protests, because they can see how they are being labeled and they are being demonized by the rest of the world because of the action of their governments. Now, whether they agree with them or not, but one thing that's really cheesing them off is that they're doing it in public view, right?
Yeah, so if you listen to LBC recently, a lot of the Jewish people that come on LBC now, well, I say a lot, I've heard a few of them, they're all going, anti-Semitism is rising because of Israel. So they're suffering, they're going, you know, they're opposed to what the Israeli government's doing. They're going, that is leading to people hating us Jews. So very much your point is valid there. What I think is important.
One quick point to add to that is, you know, in Ilan Pape's book, he talks about, you know, when the Zionist theory came out, this actually added to anti-Semitism in Europe. You know why? Because now the Europeans were suspicious. Like, are you German citizens, or are you Austrian citizens, or do you belong to a homeland somewhere far away? And those Jews were like, listen, look, I'm German and I'm British and I'm this, right? So it actually, even the idea rose, the notion of anti-Semitism. So right now,
yeah, you know, one aspect of where I do think they're worried about the PR side, and you guys tell me if you think otherwise, is I've noticed on all these interviews when they're interviewing since the WCK assassination, systemized elimination, whatever you want to call it, since that, have you noticed a lot of them are coming on and getting annoyed at the fact that the anchors aren't mentioning Hamas? So it's always like, but Hamas, but what about, why are you pointing everything else? We're your allies, we're your friends, but this wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for them. So I know they did that from the beginning, but you could see them getting agitated by why they're on trial and Hamas are being completely ignored almost, and they're getting frustrated at that. And that frustration must come from somewhere. And maybe that's the element of the PR battle that they weren't expecting. They were always thinking that whatever we do, however bad we behave, the Western world still see the resistance and still see Hamas as a terrorist organization. So they can always go, oh, but what did they do? But then some of these anchors, one of the angles that they went with is quite good actually, because they're always going. So every time an Israeli supporter goes, oh, but what about them guys? The person on the anchor's always gone, well, are you measuring your behavior based on a terrorist organization? I thought you were one of us. So the Zionist guy had to kind of retract a little bit, because it's like, because every time he's going, oh, but they did that too. We're just doing what they did. But then the anchor's like, well, is that your standard now? And they're like, no. We want our standard to be like your standard. We're a democracy, and he had to do this kind of, oh, that to big himself back up as being we're one of you. That kind of speech. And it was hilarious, because that's what they were doing. They were going, if they can get away with, they're frustrated that they feel they can't get away with what they accused the resistance of doing, especially now it's all being laid bare. All of what was it called? The Pamela Patton article. Was it an article as well as a speech as well? All to do with the rape cases. You must have heard it. It's just in the last week. Yeah. So all of they were apparently went through like 50, 60 hours worth of footage.
Yeah,
they went through thousands and thousands of images. They didn't find one single image or video or anything of sexual violence being carried out by the resistance. And that's when they said, they've been saying there's been mass rape. The 40 beheaded babies thing has completely been debunked. Yeah. And actually, the saying that's trending is every accusation is a confession. Because everything they said that the resistance did is now being proved that they didn't do it, and actually you guys did, or you guys are doing. And that the PR side of that is hurting them. And maybe they don't care, I don't know, but certainly some of their rhetoric in the last week since the WCK thing, they are being impacted by it significantly. As in, you can see they're not as arrogant and ardent as they were before.
It's a difficult one, bro, because look, WCK, they knew what they were getting into when they attacked those guys. They knew that. So, whether there's a division within the Zionists themselves, like I said, you got the element where some still want to be seen as, with the world, and whilst others are like, listen, mate, you all are Gentiles. Wait till the Messiah comes. We're gonna put you in your place. You get me?
Yeah.
Honestly, just think about it, because with all this stuff about the red calf or the bull or the heifer or whatever, right? So maybe it is being driven by those far-right religious extremists who basically are seeing like, look, this is the moment now. This is the moment we deal with these guys, then we'll deal with the PA, then we'll demolish Al-Aqsa. We've killed 60, 70,000 people, right, in Palestine, in Gaza. The Muslim world hasn't moved.
Yeah.
You know what? If tomorrow we just destroyed Masjid Al-Aqsa, do we really think their armies would come? You understand? Like, maybe it's calculated. Like, now they're thinking we got to just go for it. Because look, if it's from a religious belief, they will believe that the Messiah is going to come. I don't know if he comes the next day, right? But he's going to come when they set up Solomon's temple. Now, if you had a Messiah, a prophet that's going to come to aid you, who the hell cares about world public opinion?
Yeah, you've definitely got a point, because even if you look at the Temple Institute in Israel that they've set up, the Temple Institute previously was an organization you'd have to yourself go off and join as an Israeli public, but now it's part of the government institutes. So, for example, when women don't want to be part of consignment in the army, they get the choice of joining the Temple Institute instead. And this Temple Institute is there to build the third temple, essentially to build the next, Solomon's temple. So it's intrinsic. They're sort of before it was very secular, but it's almost becoming, and you could probably still say that is secular because it's more of a Zionist plan rather than a Jewish plan. But yeah, there's definitely an element of they are trying to speed up the process, and they're being very obvious about it. It's not hidden it's not hidden anymore.
Yeah,
and
man.
if they wanted this whole scenario to end and it was just a case of giving Hamas a bloody nose and getting the hostages back, then all of this time when Hamas have been trying to negotiate the hostages, who's the one side that's saying no? It's Israel. It's not Hamas. Hamas have been putting their cards on the table, and Israel saying no, we're not agreeing to that. So the hostage situation is actually there as a benefit to Israel to continue what they're doing, to tell their population, oh, we still got hostages in there, we still need to do this, we still, because the
100%.
hostages are out. What they have to stop.
100%, bro. I mean, look, the moment they actually almost rescued someone, they killed them, right?
Yeah.
Right. So it's crazy, man. The way I see it, is I personally think that I was chatting to a few brothers the other night, and if we look from a world public opinion, and if October the 7th is going to live in the memories of people and what happened afterwards, this change is going to be a generational change, in the sense like there's going to be people who, the same way people grew up with a certain idea of who were the bad guys, the Palestinians were the bad guys. Now that this is all in the open now, right? I believe that this is already the beginning of the end of the Zionist entity. And Rash made a fantastic point a couple of podcasts ago. He said, look, when have you ever heard non-Muslims ask the questions, should Israel have a right to exist? When has that ever happened, right? So
there was a vote. There was a vote on that. I don't know if you saw it just a week ago. There was a vote, and 58% of people, I think it was in America, said that or maybe more than that, not that Israel didn't have a right to exist, but that you're allowed to have that as an opinion. So before, that would be seen as an anti-Semitic opinion, whereas now, like I said, they did this poll. I don't know which newspaper did it, but 58% voted that shouldn't be incriminating, that if you have that view, so you're allowed to have that view. Surely that's just sending it in a certain trajectory.
Yeah,
exactly, man. So we'll see what happens. But guys, just get some final thoughts from yourselves. Obviously, it's the end of Ramadan, but in regards to Gaza, I mean, who would have thought 6 months later, this would have still been happening? Maybe we were optimistic after a couple of months of seeing what they were doing that the Muslim Ummah will move. It's been 6 months now. The people there are close to famine. I saw a video of these kids climbing up these posts where there were electric cables, and basically they were like, what's the point of living? We got no food. And the guy was pulling them down, basically, whether they were going to do it or not, who knows. But the point is that's where we are at the moment. What happened at Al Shifa. These things, what I'm saying is generational, is these things are going to come out in the future. What actually happened? It's going to come out in the future. They can't hide it. But I'm not asking you to go into Mystic Meg mode. However, what do you guys think, man? Well, 6 months in, we're here. What do you think? Do you think in Ramadan 2025, if we live that long, we'll still be speaking about the post October 7th drama? What do you think, Cam?
I think the trajectory has started, as we've said. Maybe it might not happen this year or next year, even the year after, but this is a turning point, like 9/11 was, which they didn't really. I don't think the West would have liked this sort of turning point, and that's why we've seen the reaction of the West towards the actions of Israel, because they can see they've been analyzing and they're saying, they're calling it, extremism was on the rise. What they really mean is people are turning towards Islam, not just the Muslims, but even the non-Muslim societies and stuff, and they're having a soft spot for Muslims. Before, like I mentioned in my khutbah the Friday that's just gone, that before, this idea of being a Muslim was you almost, a lot of Muslims would hide it. They wouldn't mention it. They wouldn't talk about it openly to non-Muslim colleagues. They just get by, work, and come back and go back into their bubble, right? Now it's become a case of, after these events, is actually being a Muslim. A lot of the youth are actually proud of it. They're like, yeah, I'm a Muslim, because they're on the news as the good guys for once, because people are now sympathizing with the Muslims because of what's happening in Gaza. So this is definitely a moment, a watershed moment, as they call it, for the Muslim Ummah. I think it's not a trajectory going down. This will only make things better in terms of the pressure on the leaders. Even yesterday, in Jordan, I think 13th day, rallies going on where it's now getting very violent, and the police are out there arresting people now, and it's only going to get worse. So I think the kettle is boiling. Inshallah, we'll see some sort of change, but I don't think it's going to be through the armies. The armies are institutionalized. The only armies that aren't institutionalized are the ones that are doing something. The people, like the Houthis or Hezbollah, those armies that weren't Western institutionalized seem to have the shackles off, and they seem to be doing something, whereas the rest of them have all got, since Sykes-Picot, Western imperialism and army setups that make them almost feel like they're not part of the Ummah sometimes. And it's hard to say that because there's millions of them, but how can they sit there in their barracks after this? How is there no defections anywhere in the whole world? How? It's baffling. So I think it will be through the people. It will be through, and that's my sort of Mystic Meg moment for the next, I don't know, inshallah. I want to be hopeful and say in the next 10 years at least. But we'll see.
Bro. No, subhanallah. And to be honest with you, that's probably a podcast in itself. That should Muslims have any hope in the Muslim armies?
Exactly.
However, we don't know whether there have been defections and stuff like this. Maybe it's not been publicized. Who knows? But inshallah, bro, I do hope you're right. The only thing that worries me is that the kuffar have been always good at, and certainly the Americans have always been good at, when the Muslims, like you said, are a boiling point, they've always been able to do maneuvers where they release that pressure, and then that goes down a bit, and then when the Muslims get to boiling point again, they release the pressure. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that they're not going to be able to do it this time, and that like Dr. Yaqub said in the podcast I recorded with him, that after October 7th, the world can never be the same anymore.
No.
We cannot be the same anymore, and I hope it doesn't just last for 6 months and a year, and then we're back to our pre-October 7th attitudes and so on. Rash, what you say, my bro?
Yeah, no, I think that is very important from that hopeful side to look at it, from the point of view of it's very much the leaders and, like you say, the armies that are not moving. The people on the ground are at a boiling point. The problem you've got is you need leadership, you need strategy, you need direction to be able to achieve an aims. And the problem is probably back to my analogy when we did the body and the head not being there and all of those things. But yeah, we need that. But the positive is that the Ummah absolutely wants change. The Ummah recognizes that these leaders are never going to provide us with those solutions. How Erdogan has been on this has made them realize that anybody they even had hope of in these systems, they shouldn't have hope for them. But then there's something I've always said, and you probably remember this. I always say this thing where it's not like a one thing happens and it just go, for example, it's not just like the Muslims becoming closer to Islam and realizing the issues. What you often see is at the same time, the other side is also collapsing. So it's kind of like what October the 7th, sorry, what has happened since October the 7th has completely destroyed the Western world and its value structure. For them to say that we are the bastions of justice and freedom and morals, and we're the moral arbitrator, we're the world's I would say super policeman, for the West to say that, their support of this genocidal entity destroys that completely. They can never come back on the table and go, yeah, follow our values. This is what we stand for. We know what you stand for now. And now you know how they say the global south. They are like, yeah, we know what the West is all about now. They only care about their interests. Their values only go as far as their foes. Their values don't apply. Sorry, none of it applies to their allies. Yeah, that's why they're allowing. They're not just allowing, they are facilitating. In fact, they are the oxygen. The US are the oxygen that allows Israel to exist in that way, to do what they're doing. So you're not just complicit. It's your war. It's absolutely your war. And okay, this is obviously for another podcast where you discuss what they allow. I won't go into all of that now. I think it is worth discussing. People do need to understand is, why don't America want Israel to carry on doing what they want to do? Where do the shackles need to come on? I think that is a longer discussion. But the value system, the international rules-based order, all of these apparatuses, the UN, the ICJ, all of these things completely been exposed. So at the same time the Muslims are realizing we need something else, is at the very same time the international rules-based order is collapsing. So my hope is that is part of Allah's grand plan. He is the best of planners. His grand plan, it seems to be culminating in this way. There's a wake up, and at the same time of a destruction. And not just because of these institutes, also because of liberalism. They're decaying at their roots. LGBT and transgenderism and, people, a lot of the youth, they don't want to go and fight in the armies. They're more worried about sitting at home watching movies and whatever, and just being completely, escapism is the order of the day. So at a time when they're degenerating, the Muslims are hopefully waking up. And you're right, Madge, that doesn't mean they're not clever enough to release the valve somewhere, and it might not just be up and it might go down a bit and then up again. But I think the two things are happening. I think the Muslim world and the Muslims are waking up, and the Western world is collapsing. Might take a while, but that's the trajectory, in my opinion.
Subhanallah, bro. I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. And when you're saying that, I look back at the time of in the 7th century actually, and when at the same time the Muslims were on the up. The reality is that the Byzantium, the Romans, and the Persians, they were in decline.
Yeah.
And if you read the history of even the conquests of Syria, the conquests of Persia, there was so many internal issues within those empires,
Yeah,
which weakened them, right? Which ultimately allowed the Muslims to take over. So I don't know why. When you just said that, it kind of like,
what can you remember that saying? I can't. It goes something like "strong men" or like "create."
Yeah. So it's oh man, someone mentioned that the other day. We're talking about weak men. So weak men.
It was like difficult times create strong men. Strong men kind of create like strong times.
No. So strong men create easy times. Easy times create weak men. Weak men create difficult times. Difficult times create real men. So it's like,
it's a cycle. It's a cycle, and that's what you're seeing, an element of that. And Palestine and the brothers and sisters in Gaza are the epitome of that. Listen to some of their kids. Listen to some of the speeches some of these like 7, 8-year-old kids giving. You go and ask your 7, 8-year-old, they're like on a different level to the kids of Palestine.
Bro, forget ask your 7, 8-year-old kid. You speak to someone in their 30s and 40s in the ummah.
And no disrespect, but that's because of what they've gone through. That's what they've gone through. And subhanallah, may Allah reward them abundantly. They're facing trials that we cannot even imagine.
I mean, I'm gonna mention one last thing, man, and then we'll bring it to a close, man. I was chatting we were having a bit of a circle last night at the masjid, the 27th night, so it felt blessed. And we were talking about Palestine, and there's one brother, he made a good point, because in the past I've mentioned, like, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates the right people for the right place. Because I was saying, look, ultimately, if we were in Palestine, we would have given that land up a long time ago, right? And we're talking about the Palestinian people and stuff like this. And he made a good point. He said, he quoted the ayat of the Quran, which is that Allah does not burden a soul with more than it can take, more than its scope, which means that the
These
people
guys
of
can take it.
Palestine have been put there because they can take this. You understand what I'm trying to say? Like, if it was
Mm.
anyone else, they'd have cut loose and chipped long time ago because it would have been beyond their capacity. But these people, everything they're going through, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has still not burdened them with more than it can take, which means that these people not, I mean,
Rock solid.
it's not even theoretical. Can they take it? They are taking it. They have taken it, you know. And let's make dua for our brothers and sisters, man. But guys, inshallah, I'm gonna bring the podcast to a close. You know, the last Ramadan reflection, no Ramadan reflections, Ramadan roundtable. Need to trademark that Ramadan roundtable in Ramadan 2024. There's still a few days left. You know, as many great scholars said, you know, when the horse gets to the finishing line on the last lap, that's when it puts his foot down. It doesn't take his foot off the accelerator. So even though the 27th is happened and for some 27th is tonight, let's make the most of the time that's left in Ramadan. And I make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept all our efforts
I mean,
and that you know our duas should be focused towards real change. Um, One thing I've learned in this month is there's two types of duas. There's one is where you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to change everything without even having any real intention of doing anything yourself. And the other one is when you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make me better, to make me more steadfast, to make me have more taqwa so that I can work for this. And I think that's the sort of dua that we need to be asking.
hmm.
So yeah, inshallah, guys, listen. For everyone listening at home, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe, like the video, add a comment, and to Rash and Kam, Jazakallah khair for joining me. Obviously, the Rash has been on. We've had 3 podcasts together in Ramadan, and it's been a busy month. When I look at YouTube and I see March. March was like, I think about 5 or 6 episodes. So you'll know whether it's had an impact on me or not, because you know normally there's a lull and I don't make another episode for another month or so. But I'm gonna try keep on top of it, inshallah.
Inshallah.
But guys, Jazakallah khair for joining me, and to everyone else, until the next one, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.